it all revolves around this word, doesn't it? What a word, gender dysphoria. And it's become so central to what people think the trans experience is. Dysphoria is just a fancy term for a feeling. Not everyone experiences feelings in the same way, especially surrounding gender. It was introduced into the DSM-5 in 2013 by psychiatrists who were cisgender. It's important to note that because I personally am of the opinion that the most qualified people to talk about the trans experience are trans people themselves. I use the word gender dysphoria to describe my own feelings about my body and my place in society for a long time. And I still do. But more and more, I'm trying to question this word, and I'm trying to find different ways of describing my feelings about gender, because I don't think that people realize what people call gender dysphoria can be such a huge spectrum of different kinds of feelings. I think a lot of people think of the stereotypical image of someone curled up in the shower, crying and hating their body, or not being able to look at yourself in the mirror, or wishing that you were born into a different body. Which is interesting. Not everyone feels like that. Not everyone experiences this in the same way. I never really wished that I was born into a different body. Sometimes I have wished that my body developed differently, but I have never blamed my own body as the problem. I've always just wanted to modify it freely. My body isn't the issue. It's my freedom to do what I want with my body that is such an issue for a lot of people. I think it could be interesting to think about different ways that we could talk about the feeling of unease that we have without necessarily using the term dysphoria. And you can use the word dysphoria if you like it. I'm just trying to start a conversation about this, I guess. Gender apathy, gender indifference, gender detachment, gender disinterest, gender dullness. These are all terms that really make sense to me. Not all the time, but in certain moments they could make a lot of sense to me. I do think that we need to be a little bit more empathetic and understanding that not everyone's experience with feelings is the same. And it's kind of surprising that we're even having to say this, but not everyone experiences feelings in the same way. And not everyone experiences this gender apathy, dysphoria, indifference, dullness in the same way. For example, I am what most people would refer to as a trans guy, although that isn't my exact gender identity. We'll get into that in another video. I haven't worn a binder in a year and a half, and I still have a chest, but I just don't wear a binder because I absolutely fucking hate binders. They are the worst things ever. If it's more important to me to be able to breathe than to be gendered correctly, it's not your place to tell me that I'm not trans enough. And maybe some people would say that I'm not transgender because I can go into a public space without a binder on, and I can be misgendered, and I don't give a shit. The term transgender doesn't mean transition, although, it's quite misleading because the word trans is in transgender. Transgender means detachment with the gender that was assigned to you at birth. That's all that it is. It's just not identifying with the gender that was assigned to you. There are a lot of people who do underline the importance of physical transition as a core part of being legitimate when you call yourself transgender. That to be considered trans, you must physically transition from one side to the other. And if not, then you are not really trans. And I think that this is kind of dangerous. This is a dangerous idea. It's a lot safer to allow people to experiment with the word transgender, discover themselves in their own time, without pressuring anyone into taking hormones or transitioning physically. I think that's a lot safer than trying to gatekeep the word transgender. Because if you start saying that medical transition is an absolute requirement, that could push people into transitioning, which isn't a good thing. People should think about this in their own time. Although I disagree with a lot of the fear-mongering that surrounds hormones, there are quite a lot of things to take into consideration before starting them. If we just allowed people to identify however the fuck they wanted, I feel like it would really allow people to experiment with different pronouns, different social roles, different gender expressions, before feeling pushed into physically transitioning just because a lot of people will say, oh, you're not really trans. Take people's word for it and use the correct pronouns and give them the time to really discover themselves before making any decisions. You don't have to take hormones to identify as transgender. It can be a spectrum of feelings surrounding gender. And even if after a while they decide that it's not for them, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. If someone comes to me and says, I would like you to use he, him pronouns, and they present in quite a feminine way, they have all the social markers of someone who would use she, her pronouns, I will call them he, him. And a lot of people find this quite difficult to call someone who presents very feminine and who doesn't have a binder on, so who has a visible chest, he, him. And at the start, I was kind of worried too about fucking up and misgendering someone. But it's actually not that difficult. If you want a tip for correctly gendering someone, you have to correct yourself inside your brain when you think about that person. So let's say this person X, I've been calling she, her for a while, comes to me and says, I would like you to use he, him pronouns now. You just have to correct yourself in your brain every time you think of that person. So when you think, oh, X is coming over here, I hope she will, oh. And so inside your brain, you think, no, he. You just have to rewire it. And after a while, it comes so naturally and so easy. But I think a lot of people aren't willing to make that effort, and that's on them. A world in which we can each come to terms with our own identity and be empathetic with each other about it. That's the world that I would like to live in.